So I've just, every day is the same day. I make my notes and do my NAR stuff from like 7 in the morning till 9:30, then do my company things, and then at night go back to NAR. The only difference is that in between, it seems like I have 125 Zoom conferences a day.
I know the feeling. Well, we really appreciate you joining, and we are happy to have you. So we talked a little bit about how NAR was working on some really important legislation for, let's talk about the small business relief in that legislation. Can you, I mean, that was pretty big. Can you talk a little bit about how that came about and what that process was like?
Absolutely. I think when you look at what our membership dues over the years have gotten us, both on the local, state, and national level, advocacy always was #1 for our members at all levels. I think it's been highlighted, certainly with your fight, so to speak, with the governor in Pennsylvania as far as essential and non-essential and the way we do business, but also on the national level. For those of you who remember, Jerry Giovanello was our chief lobbyist for many years. And just 2 years ago, we hired Shannon McGann as our chief lobbyist for the National Association of Realtors. And she has tremendous ties to the White House and has been involved, obviously, on Capitol Hill for many years. When Congress was debating and then obviously moving forward with different stimulus packages, realtors as independent contractors were never part of that discussion. We were able in the CARES package, stimulus #3, able to get independent contractors treated like employees for the benefits of unemployment. That's a huge win. When you think about how hard we fight to be an independent contractor, to take the other side of it to say, hey, we're an integral part of what the economy is, our agents and our people have to be protected. But if you take it a step further, we've heard from many other associations and groups that are independent contractors. Thank you for fighting, because it wasn't just realtors who benefited there. It was anybody who was an independent contractor. So the power of our lobbying made a huge difference. Now, obviously, we're not all out there every day saying, make your investment in RPAC. That would be kind of foolish. And I don't think you've seen any messages that say, you know, make sure you make your investment. But RPAC has never been more important because it got us to our legislators. The other part with the payroll protection plan and small businesses, we've really provided on the national level, as you have on the local and state level, all the different answers to the questions as they come out. What I've been told this morning through our DC contacts is that Congress is pretty close to authorizing another 300 to 400 billion for small businesses, because unfortunately, not all the small businesses were able to get their funding in the first round, especially when some of the companies that were in there, like Ruth's Chris and some other big companies that showed huge profits and have lots of cash, but had the better contacts with the banks. So I think we've made some great strides in DC, and we're going to continue to do that.
That's fantastic. So we had, and I think Matt can jump in here, we had our public policy come in. They were talking about it, I think, last week, and there was a second round of funds coming in. And you feel confident that'll happen? And should small businesses, independent contractors continue to apply?
Absolutely.
Okay. Oh. So you are the owner of how many offices now? 15?
15 offices, 700 15. Sales agents.
Okay. And you are in New Jersey, and obviously in Pennsylvania, real estate is not deemed like essential. In New Jersey, they are. So can you talk a little bit about what your offices can and cannot do in New Jersey?
We could do everything. We could
can
show
do it.
property. We can't host public open houses. We're not quote unquote open to the public, but that's more of the stay at home mandates, if you will, that exist. We have agents that are out there showing property. Some have taken every precaution to be safe. And there are days that I wonder if everybody's as concerned about their health as they should be. You know, we've preached safety first. We closed our offices on that Monday, this March 9th, before we had to. We gave our employees the ability to work from home and told our agents to please stay away and work remotely and virtually. But there are agents that go into the office. I mean, I can't mandate what 700 people do on a daily basis. But we're still showing property. We're still closing property. Our biggest obstacle has been getting COs in local communities because many of those communities have shut down. We've had a little bit of difficulty in some of the counties for title searches because if the title company does not have a good relationship with the county that the property's in, then it takes a little bit longer. So again, the county, the communities are closed to the public, but the businesses can deal directly because those people are at work for the most part on a daily basis. So we're going to be down as a company probably 75 or 80% in the month of April. March was okay. We were down about 40%. I say okay, but you know, we did do some business. We've been closing pretty consistently. We have had some issues with walkthroughs and inspections on transactions, but just the day-to-day headaches that you have. And then the last thing is we are in a marketplace that has attorneys. So we have attorney review in our contract. So some attorneys are not working as diligently, and that's no knock because who knows who's doing homeschooling and has to do everything else.
Right.
So that's just slowed down the process a little bit. But from a technical standpoint, we can work.
Cool. So let's talk about the legislative meetings that we were supposed to have in DC.
Yeah.
In a couple weeks. So this is all going virtual. How is that going?
We've had a couple of conferences. I can tell you that in March, I think it was the 23rd or 24th, someplace in that period, we had the budget review meeting, which had 155 between volunteer members and NAR staff presenting the different topics that we have to look at for 2021, and I chaired that meeting. We did it virtually. We had in the past done that in person in Chicago with NAR staff and all the respective teams coming to Chicago if they weren't based there and they were based in DC, so that we could have face-to-face interaction and ask questions in regard to the budget. Needless to say, we couldn't do that. So I worked with NAR staff, Senior Vice President John Pierpoint, who's our Chief Financial Officer, Bob Goldberg, and myself. We went through the budget along with Treasurer John Floor. We went through the budget and we looked at the variances that we projected from 2020 to 2021 and said if it's more than 5%, then obviously there's something that has a big change to it, or more than 8%, depends upon where the topic was. So we told the senior vice presidents to present the major changes to their budget, and everything that was operational, almost look at a consent budget. We also made sure that the budget was mailed out to the members of the committee a week ahead of time. A lot of times it's up to the last minute because there's tweaking. So everybody had the week to look at the budget. They all had to get their questions to me by Monday, and our meeting was a Wednesday. And we went through in about 5 hours what might have taken us 10 hours in the past because we were better prepared. And we did it via Zoom conference. And I got more comments that said, you know what, maybe we could do this in the future. So I think that's one of the things that you learn from this is what travel is going to change, what needs there are to be in person versus being face-to-face here. And we all know this isn't the same, but it is more efficient at times. So when we looked at doing that committee meeting, we said, okay, we can do committee meetings virtually at the national level. The challenge is going to be having a board of directors meeting of 900 people and seeing how that plays out. We have an election for treasurer. How is that good? And we've gone through and we've had 2 or 3 test runs already. And we have actually, if anybody's a football fan, and I know you guys are all big Giant fans, so you're interested to see who we take at the 4th pick. But, you know, here you've got the NFL having a virtual draft, if you will. And you're talking about billions of dollars of an industry that's going to do this virtually. They are doing a run through today and a run through Wednesday in preparation for Thursday, because Thursday is a TV event. So we're having a number of different run throughs, if you will, on the virtual national meetings. We know it's not going to be the same, but we're going to have the economic update from Lauren June. We're going to have the legislative update from Joe Ventrone, Shannon McGann, and Bill Malkasian. We're going to have different important sessions that we would have had. But there'll be a webinar where you ask questions in the chat room or Q&A through the moderator, because you won't be able to go to a microphone per se in person to ask that question. We're trying to get some different legislators to come in and present. There was going to be a session with Chris Christie and I can't remember who the other person was off the top of my head. So we're going to still have some sessions, and we're going to try to deliver as great an experience as we can.
That's awesome. That was going to be one of my questions. You know, we're experiencing, you know, different initiatives that we talked about in the beginning of the year, and now we find ourselves actually having to do them, such as these coffee talks and webinars and Zoom. A lot of our committee meetings are through Zoom and webinars. So we, you know, at a local level can see conducting some meetings, some committees this way. So I guess with NAR on a bigger level, I can't imagine the entire country coming together on a Zoom for a committee meeting, voting, a board meeting. I could see that as a challenge, overwhelming.
Well, the webinar can work, and I saw that you have Lee Brown speaking on Thursday. Mm-hmm. We started a speaker series for our company, so we've had 4 speakers so far in the first couple weeks, and we have another 3 scheduled this week, including Lawrence on Friday. Lee spoke to 250 of our agents through the same setup where it was her, she shared her screen, her presentation, and then at the end she and I did Q&A, and I was reading the questions from the chat room and going back and forth since they couldn't. And it was, you know, we've had 250 people, we've had Lee, we've had Brian Copeland, who's a great presenter, and that's straight from a business standpoint. Tommy Choi from Chicago. Last week we had Pete Koff from Cincinnati. This week we have a life coach. The agents have asked us for somebody to deal with the day-to-day of how you get through dealing with the ups and downs. You know, this is a new experience that none of us have been through, where you're kind of locked into your seat, hopefully, and you're self-quarantined. You know, my 22-year-old daughter gets mad when we go to the store for food because she thinks, well, you know, who touched the food? And she said we should have it delivered through, you know, through Peapod or Whole Foods or whatever. And I said, yeah, but they touched the food there to prepare it. So what's the difference? At least I know it's fresher instead of getting it delivered 8 days later and things of that nature. But we're all adapting to what's happening differently. You know, and one of the things that I think you look at is the definition, you know, of what's essential and what's not essential. You know, New Jersey, we're an essential business. But if you're not practicing safety first in your company, then you're really not leading your agents the right way. And I've made it clear to them, we're going to survive this. If this goes on 6 months or a year, you know, who knows what our business looks like at that point, but I don't think any of us think that's going to happen. But I've told them, I'd rather not make a deal. And I'll give you a perfect example. Yesterday, one of our agents got a call on a rental. Direct contact from rent.com. Didn't know who the customer was. The customer didn't want to pay the commission. When we asked about signing just a form that said you don't know anybody with COVID-19, that you've not had it yourself, and just 3 or 4 basic questions, no hold harmless, no indemnifications, just a disclosure. They didn't want to sign that. And the last question we asked is, do you have a mask, gloves, any PPE? And the answer to all 4 was, well, we're not going to sign anything and we're fine. And I said to the agent, well, then you know what? There's probably 25 other brokers that would take them. So let them do it, because I'm not comfortable that they don't want to do the basic things to tell you that they're going to practice safety. And I think you just have to make that decision and let your agents know that it's their safety is more important than anything else. And, you know, I think you send the right messages when you do that.
No, I agree. I agree 100%. We have a few questions in the chat here. Matt, did I miss a couple here? If you guys have any questions for Charlie, please type them in there. We'll be looking through here.
There's some stuff that's related to the unemployment compensation, which is a kind of a different conversation than what we're having here today. So I'll mention something about that later on. Charlie, one thing I would like to relay to you and thank NAR for is we've asked them to get involved on a couple of these different conversations. We had Lawrence Yoon with us last week. We had Drew Myers, our political representative. As you saw, we have Brian Green. NAR has been phenomenal with us reaching out to them and helping to facilitate getting various people in front of our folks. And they've been great conversations, great dialogue. Particularly Lawrence Yoon one, we had an overwhelming response to that. So please let Bob Goldberg know we are very appreciative of that ability to let his people help us out. Because with Drew Myers, we had Megan Booth jumped on, and she is just like Encyclopedia Britannica about the CARES Act. I mean, she just had it like she knew the page, the verse, chapter, without missing a beat. So that was like high quality content for our folks.
I would tell you, Matt, that Brian Green on Friday worked at HUD for 29 years. We hired him I say long, about 6 months before the Long Island Newsday story broke that did the testing. I believe it was of 67 brokers and 65 failed when it came to practicing fair housing, including teachers and instructors who were supposed to teach 3-hour courses and said, well, you guys all know this stuff. And after about an hour and 45 minutes said you all pass and leave the course. So obviously fair housing is a big focus of ours. And it was before the Long Island story. But Brian Green came from HUD, 29 years experience. He arranged a meeting, I think it was in January, with Ben Carson and the HUD leadership, where we basically said to HUD, you know what, this is a broker problem and we're on it and we're going to do a better job. And we started about a week later with the ACT initiative, the accountability, the culture, and the training that became the focus of where we were trying to work with HUD to make sure each brokerage and each agent knew their responsibility when it came to fair housing. And I can tell you that the last thing that Dr. Carson wanted to do was get involved on the testing side, because he knew that testing would be a one-time occurrence, where if we didn't change the culture of the way we treated each and every person in our business, that we would have an issue. And we've addressed it in our own company. We speak 40 languages. We're a bedroom community from northern New Jersey down to central New Jersey. So picture the George Washington Bridge. We go 10 miles north of that, about 30 miles south, and about 20 miles west. That rectangle is where our 15 offices are located. We speak 40 languages, and I never thought twice about us not treating everybody the same way. But we made that an initiative in our own company, that we had those discussions in each of the office meetings, and I still do that now in the Zoom meeting, because using that rental example, we didn't care who that customer was. You know, they could have been a billionaire or been poor as could be. Black, white, you know, any ethnicity, you know, anybody. Safety was going to be first. And I knew that agent would do the right thing. And they texted me that night and said, I know you wouldn't work with them. I want to make sure I did the right thing. And I said, you know what? And as I've told all our agents, copy me on any email or any communication, because I've got the confidence in the way you treat people, that if I have to be the person that's on the, you know, the chain to handle the situation, I want them to feel comfortable with that. So, you know, when you're involved with things, I did a session on Friday for NAR, and it was the same discussion of making sure that everybody gets treated the right way in fair housing. And then again, in advocacy, are we protecting everybody? And I think that those efforts under Shannon will continue to grow.
So Charlie, we do have a question about your business. Earlier, you were talking about some of your numbers as it related to March and what you're expecting perhaps in April. And the question comes in, you know, except for open houses not being utilized, why is business down 75 to 80% in April? Are buyers and sellers not interested in buying and selling?
Yep, that's exactly why. What seller wants a stranger in their house? What buyer wants to put themselves potentially at risk? So those are two things. Even though you can do business, how many people have lost their jobs during this? You know, we all see what the unemployment numbers are, you know, record breaking. New Jersey, Pennsylvania, you name the state, record breaking. Uncertainty of values. I know a lot of people think values are going to take a big hit. We already had inventory shortage in our marketplace, and I'm sure you had the same thing. Take inventory shortage, multiply it by the amount of people that don't want a stranger in their house, and you can see where the business is going to go. Also take the appraisal process, which we know it can be done desktop, so we can address that side of it and get through that part. But inspectors, how many want to go through? We use a couple of services to take photography for new listings, and staging and all those kind of things. Those businesses are down 80 or 90%. Okay, we deal with a couple of stagers who've said, we'll do it for almost nothing, just to try to get in your good graces for the next client. So just because we can do business, I think we're in an environment right now where people are more concerned about their health than where they're going to live. And then I'll give you one other statistic. If you look at traffic online, all the major portals are down 45 to 50%, whether it's Realtor.com, Zillow, or any other source, because you know what? When you're sitting online, the last thing you're doing is looking for your next house when you're worried about paying your bills for this house.
Right.
You know, we have a big issue going forward with liquidity in the banks because people aren't making their mortgage payments. They're looking for forbearance. Look how many building owners are not collecting rent. Projected rent collection for the month of May is at 50%. The national not home builders, multi-house dwelling, you know, everybody has an acronym. I think they thought they were going to be at 83% for April collections, because that was April 1. They expect that to drop significantly, especially in certain areas where mayors are urging people not to pay their rent and make sure they buy food for their family first, which is happening in New York City. So that's always been a big fight between the building owners and the mayor anyway. So just because we can do business doesn't mean people want to do business.
And I think that's key. You know, we have, you know, in Pennsylvania today, you know, they're talking about protests of getting back to work, and, you know, going back to work means, you know, certain risks. And do people want to take that risk? Speaking of liquidity, the liquidity facility that was talked about last week to help these banks fund any new loans and the new requirements for new loans. I saw today JP Morgan Chase is now putting a hold on the HELOC. Is there any movement on that front as far as the liquidity facility that NAR was working with some of these?
Yeah, we're working with the GSEs, Fannie and Freddie, and some of the big lenders to not be as strict, if you will. Lawrence, who is speaking to us on Friday, and I think he's spoken to you recently, talked about the first-time home buyer puts down between 7 and 13%, and may have a better risk than somebody who puts down 25 or 30%. Well, what JP Morgan Chase has done initially is say, you need 20% down for us to consider you and a credit score of 700. So don't even talk to us unless you have that, even if you're a long-term customer. One of my good friends where I live works for them. And I sent him a text. I said, Timmy, is this really the case? And he just said to me, it could be worse than that. They may be looking at 750 and 30% down internally, but they're not going to tell you what their underwriting guidelines are going to be. And they're going to look market to market as well, where they've had their highest risk loans.
Hi.
And a lot of other
Betsy,
things.
how are you? I'm well. It's
Me
now
too. So those are some things that, the big lenders have a lot of risk. You know, one of the things we keep talking about with all the urging of forbearance, what are foreclosures going to look like in the spring of 21?
Right.
You know, I hate to say this, but you get used to not paying your bills, and you're not going to get your job back right away, or you're not going to get it back at the same income level. Where does that leave us? You know, look at some of the buildings that are for sale in any of the major cities, right? And you look at the spreadsheets. Well, vacancy rates could be 95, 97%, but the revenue could drop 30%. And try to get those rents back. And then the mayor in New York City last week said, don't pay rent, and told the landlords to use the security, which we know in New Jersey you can't do. It's a violation of truth in renting, but unfortunately, when you get the mayor of New York City, it's on every major station, and the people in New Jersey think it's the same thing for them. Well, it's not. You know, so we've just got a lot of misinformation because of TV stations, and, you know, whether it's Governor Cuomo or Governor Murphy, and you have the same thing where the Philly stations cover South Jersey, and, you know, you've got different ways of doing things. So that's a concern for all of us.
Yeah. One thing that just keeps coming to my mind is, when we went through the Great Recession, these banks were, given a huge bailout, and they were put through certain stress tests. And the question that keeps coming to my head is, we're about 4 weeks, maybe a month into this, and already they're starting to throw up some red flags. And I guess the question is, that testing that these banks had, I would think they would have to have some solvency for a few few more months and not just 30 days into this. So it's always just been a question in the back of my head. You know, is it worse than the Great Recession, or do they see something that we don't, that you know, they're taking steps this soon?
You know, unfortunately, I've been doing this business since 1981. I won't count the years because I know what next year is. I've been through 9/11, but you had, as horrific as that was, you knew what it was. You knew it was a terrorist act. You knew our response was going to be what it was, but you had a sense that you were going to get back to some level of normalcy across the country. Certainly the Northeast was a little bit slower than the West because we were impacted here, you in Pennsylvania. We had many people, and I still have friends 20 years later that never went back to work because they were just emotionally spent and went out on permanent disability because they just couldn't do their job anymore because, you know, one person went to 15 funerals in 20 days that worked for Cantor Fitzgerald, you know, so anybody in that frame, you know, you knew what you had. The recession, you know, you could say it started in 07 and went to 13. You could say 9 to 13, 9 to 12. Everybody experienced it differently. But we knew there was going to be a significant correction. You know, as Lawrence presented, we've had a 10-year, if you look at economic data, a 10-year growth, okay? I would challenge him, and I have challenged him to say, well, geez, I didn't feel like things were positive in 10 and 11 or 11 and 12, but I can see from a national level where it came from. This, because it's medical, if you will, without a vaccine, you know, I've listened to a lot of things and I've read a lot of things. You know, J&J, which is based in New Jersey, said it takes on average 5 to 7 years to develop a vaccine because of all the testing that has to go on for side effects, after effects, things of that nature. And yet you listen to Bill and Melinda Gates and they think that we could have a vaccine sometime in 21. And I think to myself, okay, I know we're rushing medicine, if you will, and we're rushing research, but will it be safe? You know, we all get flu shots. I don't know how long it took for a flu shot to be developed. I don't think anybody here does unless you're somebody who's followed all those kind of things. You just know it's there now. So are we going to return to normal without knowing you could have a relapse? If you read what's happened overseas, Singapore is probably the worst example of they had COVID-19. They flattened the curve. They said it's time to get back to business. And then they had a total relapse in the last 3 days where cases spiked over 500% because they went back to normal too quick. And that's my biggest fear. You know, when do you let everybody, quote unquote, go back to normal? And how are you going to all look at things? Are you going to restaurants to sit, you know, 40 people in an area that's supposed to have 20? I don't know. You know, I kind of like cooking. Okay. My wife kind of likes it too because she just would rather me do that, and thankfully my kids would too. So I got the nod. But you know, we basically cook every night.
Yeah.
You know, or you order in to support local businesses because that's what we do in helping keep communities strong.
Yeah.
But how many people have you seen outside of your family in the last month? You know, we've really tried to keep that social distancing because you know what? It is proven that's the only thing that's working in certain places. And then you know, to your point about the uncertainty, Stephanie, you know, there are people that are protesting to get back to normal. Ask the healthcare workers what they think about that.
Yeah.
Ask them who, you know, are on the front lines in food stores, how many people they want in the store at one time. You know, look at it from somebody else's eyes,
Mm-hmm.
not yours.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that to me is if you were a nurse when somebody comes into the emergency room, do you want their whole family to follow?
Right.
You know, I think there's a lot of uncertainty, and that's, you know, we canceled at NAR a month ago. We canceled all activities up till April 1st in terms of travel and meetings. This way, local associations and state associations could plan to do more things virtually. I don't know if we're going to have a convention in November. I'd love to think that we are going to be in person, but, you know, I can ask 100 people here. If you could travel in November to New Orleans, would you?
Yeah.
You know, everybody raise your hand that says you'd go. Yep, one.
Yeah.
Me, because I probably have to be there, but
Yeah.
yeah, you know what? So that's when we make decisions for all of you, we're thinking of you, not us.
Yeah.
Because when you do schedule events, then you're putting pressure on all of you to make a decision. So Vince and I have a call at 10 o'clock, and we're going to decide probably in the next month what we're going to do with November. And I could care less if it's an installation for me to be NAR president. That means nothing. To me, it's all about somebody's health. And if we had 5,000 people instead of 25,000 people, do you still do it? But yet you could have 100,000 virtually go to that conference. So we just got to look at what's best for everybody, not for one person. And as I said, I think we're, you know, I told my company, I don't think we're back to work much before, I hate to say this, but, and I'm an optimist, I don't think we have any sense of normalcy before July 1st.
Yeah.
And just because somebody says you can, should you? Right? You all have listings. Do you want strangers in your house May 15th because you got everything lifted May 1st?
Right. That is true.
So there's a lot to think about. So if you go back to the Great Recession or 9/11, they seem pale in comparison to this because it's health. And look at the numbers. You know, I live in Bergen County. Look at the numbers in northern New Jersey that are close to New York City. You know, I lost a high school teammate that I played baseball and basketball with for a lot of years, and 4 years of high school. One of our agents lost a mother and a mother-in-law. Another agent lost an aunt and an uncle this past weekend. We had one of our administrators' mother pass away, all with COVID-19. All were healthy before. And you read all the stories. So, you know, without knowing anything, why would you think that you're going to be back to normal? And that's what I've told our agents. We'll figure it out. We'll survive. And I think all real estate companies are pretty much in the same boat. So it's not that you're gaining or losing an advantage.
I agree. I agree. It is the health workers. They are, you know, they are on the front line, and if they could, and I don't think until it hits you personally, or you know somebody personally, you really appreciate the gravity of what this does to families, and how easy it is just to hunker down. And you can work on your business. You can work on your business. You can grow it. There are certain physical limitations, yes, but I think all of us have that opportunity to, you know, as we hunker down, work on it. And I know NAR is working with their members with the right tools right now. Great. I know at GPAR, we're working on bringing different programs, speakers, to help our members work on their business.
Yeah, Lee's topic of Be the Resource really
Yeah.
resonated well with our agents. And I can tell you that all of the agents have focused on, or all of the speakers have focused on, do your daily routine, be the trusted advisor, be the humanitarian. You know, your first text, your first email, your first phone call should be, are you okay? Is there anything I can help you with? A number of you live in a city. We have Jersey City and Hoboken, and Montclair, which are some heavily populated areas. We talked about at our first company meeting, which we call town hall, kind of a +1 attitude. Check on your family and check on a neighbor. And we had one agent who lives in a townhouse in Jersey City, which has a lot of townhouses. And she had seen her neighbor next door, knocked on the door, nobody answered, put a note underneath with her phone number that said, I'm going to the food store tomorrow, do you need anything? The woman called her in about 10 minutes and said, I don't drive. I'm afraid to go out. Could you pick me up 3, 4, 5 things, whatever it was? And Charlene picked up, 25 things, left them on a note and said, you know what? Glad you asked me to. So
That's really nice.
that +1, look at somebody else and know how fortunate, a lot of us are and what you can do in that regard. So Lee's great in terms of being the resource. I did notice one question in the chat room that I'll answer. We've spoken to the city of New Orleans. The mayor wants the gatherings and the festivals that have been scheduled to stop because they're outdoor. There's a lot of drinking. There's a lot of close contact, so on and so forth. She has not yet addressed conventions and sporting events because the New Orleans Saints are a huge draw that play in front of 60 or 70,000 people. And if they're allowed to have fans and the NFL lets them, her representation was strictly for outdoor gatherings and festivals when she was pressed further on the questions. We're looking at it from the standpoint of, can the city serve us, and would our 25,000, if everybody went, would they be considered a gathering if you went down to Bourbon Street for dinner? Or if you went to a restaurant, will all the restaurants be open? So we're addressing it, and I have no feel for if we will have the convention or not at this point. But after we do the virtual conference, we'll make a decision early enough so people don't go and make airline reservations or hotel reservations. And we normally would have opened up registration already, and we're not going to do that. That's going to be held off probably till, I'd say, June 1st to July 1st until we make a decision if we're actually going to have it.
Okay, great. All right, well, we are about 10 minutes from the hour, and I know you have a very important phone call. Do we have any more questions for Charlie? Matt, do you have anything?
So just a couple of things, guys, before you get out of the room and we let Charlie go. Before you leave, let us know your thoughts. Send direct message, private messages to me with your thoughts on this session. Number 2, please let your GPAR friends know about these different events. We'd love to see more people getting in here. We have plenty of capacity to have more guests get into these chats. This is very valuable conversation. I mean, listen to what we're hearing from the 2021 president of NAR. That's some solid stuff. Finally, as it relates to the unemployment compensation, we will work on getting some better resources to you guys, or I should say a person to maybe engage with you guys in this platform. But pay attention to all of the stuff that's been coming from the Pennsylvania Association. They've been giving great guidance. They have frequently asked questions answered. If you guys are unsubscribed to that just listed, you better resubscribe yourself, because that's where the fountain is coming on all the state stuff. That's your #1 resource. So guys, go to PAR, get yourself back on that list. That's where the information is coming from. Finally, on that point, even if the governor said today and made our work essential, you're still able to go ahead and apply. It's not it's not an either or proposition. You're able to do both of those things. So without getting all into the details as to why that is, if you were essential today, you're still able to go ahead and file.
Thank you, Matt. Thanks.
Matt, keep one thing in mind on essential. The the governor of New York went essential one day for 3 days. I'm sorry, non-essential, went essential for 3 days and then thought that the realtors were taking advantage of it being an essential business in terms of trying to get into buildings that did not want to allow guests into a building, and a lot of different rules and regulations, plus all of Western New York, the Buffalo, Syracuse, Albany, Rochester, all were up in arms from a safety standpoint because their numbers were just starting to spike. And they thought it would actually make things worse by realtors being out there because it just meant more people were in the public. So they went non-essential, essential, non-essential within about 5 days, 6 days. So, you know, just as quickly as somebody makes you essential, they can make you non-essential.
Right.
Yes,
And it's key to remember that the Pennsylvania Association has never been advocating for full resumption of business as usual. It has been limited ability to do the work, most particularly with transactions that were in the pipeline prior to this shutdown taking effect.
And that's what Governor Murphy did for us, which allowed people not to be stuck in the middle of transactions. One other thing, just check with your movers, because a number of movers have cut back their schedules because not as many transactions. So make sure if you do have a transaction in place that you're allowed to complete, that everybody is able to complete the transaction, and that if somebody's moving into a vacant house, that the mover can actually come take their furniture, right? Gloves and protective PPE as best they can, because now you have new people touching your furniture, delivering it to a house. And again, it's all the safety issues.
Matt, one more thing. I just want our members to know that PAR, we do have a task force. We are looking into guidelines, procedures, suggestions for agents if we do become life essential. When we do go back to work, that there will be certain guidelines and procedures, and we are working on that. So we are, you know, at the state level, definitely looking into the safety of not only our members, but the clients and their families too. So.
Hey, I'm sorry, this is Summer. There were a couple of important questions that came out. Someone said that I've applied for regular unemployment. Should I apply for PUA? It would be a good idea to apply for PUA because that is specifically for for this current crisis. The other one, someone said, how do I join Just Listed? You can email us and we can connect you with the person at PAR about that.
Summer, I'm putting that in the chat right now.
Okay, cool.
Okay.
And there was one person who said they were talking about whether they can apply for unemployment, whether they're partial. So specifically, it says if you're applying for PUA, it's for partial or full unemployment. So thank you.
All right, everyone. Well, Charlie, thank you so much. I hope you come back and join us for another coffee talk.
Absolutely. You know, whatever you need. I'm only 90 miles away.
That's right.
Either that or a call, but you know, and feel free, Matt, you've got my cell number. If anybody wants to chat or talk, they can text me with questions that I could try to help them with as well at any point in time. So, you know, our region has always been real special to me. I've been involved with it for 15 years plus. So, you know, even though we kid about being different sports fans, we all hate Boston together. So what's the difference? So have a good day. Appreciate all your time.
All right, Charlie.
Okay,
thank you.
thanks,
Be safe.
Thank you all.
Thanks.
Be good.
You too.
All right, guys, leave your
All right.
thoughts before you get out of here. Thank you very much. Have a great day, and we hope to see you tomorrow morning. Take care.
Stay safe.